Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Mindshifters Radio with your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie. Michael and Jeanie share with you the wisdom of the ancient Aramaic internal process of forgiveness. They offer tools and support 5 days a week. They will support you in building a solid foundation within yourself to live in pure love. In Aramaic, Rakhma. Michael is the author of So Why Is This Happening to Me Again? For more information on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. And now your co-host, the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael and Jeanie Ryce.
To the brightness within you, and the truth that is rooted within me.
Hi, and welcome to Mindshifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce. I'm sitting in a McDonald's. That was the closest internet I could find. So it may be a little noisy, so I won't stay on very long. Today is Memorial Day celebration number 278, and our call-in number is 646-200-4169. Press 1 to talk to Michael, and we do already have a caller on. Hello, Michael.
Hey, sweetie, let's hear from our caller right off.
All right, it's area code 828. You're on the air.
Yeah, that would be Dale. How are you doing, Jeanie?
Hey, we're blessed. How are you, young man?
Fantastic. And this is Aramaic Friday.
I was going to say I'm on an extended network right now, and I'm trying to get back towards civilization to get a better signal. So if I lose you, I'll call back. I apologize.
You actually sound very good.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, good, clear signal. So, awesome. Well, welcome to the show. For those who don't know Dale Hoffman is becoming one of the foremost Aramaists in the world, and is someone that we've worked with for, it's getting on about 15 or 17 years now, isn't it, Dale?
17. It's 17 now, yeah, 2012. I met you 17 years ago this month, actually, literally. Wow.
Time flies when you're having fun. So that's awesome, and this is the first in our series of Aramaic Fridays, which we hope will be something that will continue to extend and extend and extend. And we're here to talk about the ancient Aramaic language. And Dale, just from the perspective of the work that you've developed around the Aramaic, you want to just do your introduction to the Aramaic language and the Aramaic teachings of Yeshua?
Well, absolutely. You know, I was first exposed to Aramaic through your work, of course, and it just dove headfirst into the forgiveness work. And I mean, the one thing when people ask me what's the one thing that I feel is most important above all else, and that was what you got into my heart right from the beginning, was understanding what forgiveness really meant. And after working with, going out to Heartland, I guess I was about 6 or 7 months out there at Heartland, and then I started really getting deep into the language itself, and I was I was very fascinated with how the ancient Aramaic language especially has phonetic sounds. It's like whenever you hear the sound oo, it means something. If you hear ta, it means something. And if you learn what the different sounds are that comprise words like hai, iman, uta, then you actually can define the words, which is something we don't have in English. But what was more fascinating than that with me is, first of all, I was amazed that a lot of scholars weren't quite picking that up, but yet at the same time, it was that those sounds went right back to direct experiences, and they were not so much in the ancient Aramaic language. It wasn't, the deeper I got, I realized it wasn't so much about what's happening outside, but rather about my perception of what's happening, quote unquote, outside, and what's happening inside me. And I thought it was interesting. Like, there's not really the word te doesn't mean come. What it actually means is I want for you to come to me, or I desire for you to come to me, which is different than English, which come means come. But in Aramaic, it's more about what's my inner experience and my relationship with what I perceive as, again, outside. And I got really deep into the scholarly work for a while until I realized a lot of people were arguing with each other about, does it mean this, does it mean that, does it say this, does it say that? And then I broke the cardinal law, which is I said, well, have you actually tried putting it into practice? Maybe trying the exercise. Oh, yeah, and literally I got looks. It happened several times, and I got a lot of looks that were like, kid, you're in the wrong room. And I realized it, and I sort of took off and went, just sponged up everything I could possibly get, which especially about, at that point, 12, 13 years ago, was not much at all. There's still not much now. And it always, if I didn't have the root of what I learned, going right in head first and working with my heart and with true Aramaic forgiveness and with, honestly, the core of why is this happening to me again is all about, I wouldn't be where I am now. I'd probably just be another one of those stuffed shirts, sort of poking into the darkness in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you actually do the work. And, of course, that's one of the challenges with scholars is not many scholars that I've run into have much of an interest in going beyond their intellect. And the intellect can be one of the defenses against actually doing your work. One of the most severe ways of not doing your work is to just jump into your intellect and pretend that you'll find all the answers there and you'll figure everything out. In our codependence workshop, we offer what I call the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind, and one of the pseudo-solutions of the non-being mind is, well, if I could just figure this out, then everything would be okay. And you can't figure it out, and everything isn't going to be okay if you keep trying. Everything's going to be okay if you start forgiving and literally get to the point where you get to experience being out of the constructs, especially of the left brain, and experiencing directly what life is about, which, of course, is the purpose of forgiveness.
Absolutely. It's funny how when I've been digging a lot lately into Greek culture, Greek language also, to sort of see where in a lot of cases things ran amok, because I realized that by the time it got to Latin and into Old English, it was the damage was sort of already done. So I started going into reverse, and I'm actually okay, here's my big announcement. I'm actually learning Greek now, so that's another layer, is to see, so that I've got something to back up, like, look, rather than just saying, look, it got lost in translation, maybe trying to figure out a little bit of how. It's funny, because there's a lot of work, not just Aramaic to Greek, but any language to another, there's certain words that you just can't translate, or there's certain words that, Milta is one of those words. It's great because you say mind energy. In the beginning was the Milta. And it's like in interviews all the time I'm asked, what's the hardest word to translate? And it's like, word is the hardest word. I could go on for 10 paragraphs, and it's like, it's funny because I'll say I can go on for 10 paragraphs and barely scratch the surface, and then I always come back and say, you know what, think of it like this, mind energy. Just forget all the rest of the stuff, because we just don't even in English, we don't have a lot of words that are direct translations. We just don't have them from Aramaic because it's not a miracle language, but it was such a deeply experiential language, and the sounds coming out of their mouths were based on direct experience, as opposed to that sort of all the mental concepts that are jumbled up in English, Latin, Anglo-Saxon, and all the languages that English has come from. It's not about the language, it's about putting it into practice. That's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, for sure. And, in the original work done on the Khabour's manuscript, the translators came up with actually two for that. In the beginning was the word, and one was, in the beginning was the mind energy, of course, and the other was, in the beginning was the willed action. Yeah. And we recognize that the willed action comes from being. It's not designed to come from the mind. It's what supplies the mind with its fuel And most people get trapped into the cycles of what's already in their minds and forget to tap into the fuel source. And, I don't know of anybody that has a device. I ask this question all the time. How many have a device at home that if you don't plug it into a proper power supply works really well? And, of course, everybody looks at me like, are you crazy? Of course, if it's not plugged into a proper power supply, it's not going to work. Well, what happens to most people when they plug into their intellect, they unplug from the willed action. They unplug from being, and, of course, our definition of a human life is hold a newborn child. And when you hold a newborn child, you know exactly what human life is and exactly what we're designed for. And our impulse, our thinking is designed to come from that level of being. It's not designed to come from a storage device that just stores the mind energy from the past.
Yeah, that's funny because like when I first dug headfirst into the Why Again work out at Heartland, it brought up so much quote unquote crap for me. So much stuff came up that my first reaction was, okay, this guy's got to be wrong. There's got to be something off. And it's like he's got to be wrong because it's like for some reason he talks about certain things and I just feel, I don't know, I feel irritated and I feel edgy and all these other things. And it was amazing for me because even though what I'm seeing in front of me and what's going on around me with the resonance in the room, with everybody going through this tremendous healing, it was like in the beginning that was my thing. I was used to that. I was used to my mask and I was used to just thinking that what I was experiencing in my head was what was actually going on, that my own reality was the actuality out there. And I had never even heard the distinction between reality and actuality. So, of course, the first thing I did was, and I was never like, oh, this guy is an idiot or anything like that. It was just like, I don't know. Something's got to be off here. I don't know what it is. And it's funny because I experience that sometimes in my work. And I don't mean in the beginning. In the beginning, it was like, wow. But then all of a sudden when my stuff starts coming up, it's like, okay, it's got to be him. No, it's got to be her. No, it's this one over here. No, wait a second. It's that one over there. And it's funny how we can do all this finger pointing. It's almost like today's political landscape. Finger pointing all around, not understanding that it's what's going on inside of me. And it happens with me where I'm with an audience or doing a really deeply experiential workshop or something, and I actually had someone come up to me a year and a half, well, it's been a little over a year and a half ago now, and she's like, you have to be wrong. I was, well, what do you mean? She's like, well, you were attacking this and attacking that. And I was like, I wasn't attacking anything. And it was interesting because literally a dozen people crowded in around us, and we're talking about, Dale didn't say that. What he said was this. And then I think I mentioned this when I was on your show a few weeks ago. She said, you have to be wrong or I have nowhere to stand. Everything that I've built my life on doesn't actually even exist. And I remember standing there with her, and I said, is that a bad thing? And I remember that energy shift where it was amazing because a lot of times they just want to throw it back, but she was able to stand there in that and really not necessarily take ownership of it. She didn't. She didn't have the forgiveness tools in her lap yet, but it was an amazing thing how it's always out there. And the craziest thing is when you find out it's actually in here, you can change it. And rather than trying to paw around at what's out there, and when you start changing what's in your heart, that's when your reality changes. That's when actuality, you realize that it's not a 1 and a 2, actuality being something that is foisted upon you, but it's actually there in your heart, and we put all of those bushel baskets over that light, and when you start taking the bushels off, it's just amazing. And, of course, I'm still taking bushels off, and I think I'll probably be doing that for at least a couple more weeks in my life. A lot of work. Yeah. It's beautiful, though.
Yeah, and it is a shock for most people who live solely and strictly in their minds. I don't know if you've listened to the interview on NPR with Jill Bolte Taylor. Have you tapped into that at all?
No, I haven't, no.
Oh, you'll love it. Do you know who Jill Bolte Taylor is?
I don't think so. I really don't think so.
This will just add such a piece to what you're doing, Dale. Go to our website, and under other links, there's a link to an NPR interview, or you can just go to NPR and Google and search for Jill Bolte Taylor interview. Jill Bolte Taylor is a neuroscientist who gets up one morning and goes out to get on her exercise bike and start her daily routine, and all of a sudden she realizes that she's having a right brain stroke. And she describes the whole process of the stroke. And what she does is she describes our work. She describes how her whole left brain generated world is a totally false thing. All the hostility, the fear, you look in the medical arena at the amount of insanity there is in the research game and the backbiting and the hatred and the competition. And so she's going through this left brain stroke, and she describes the whole process and how everything that her mind has constructed is falling apart, is coming undone, and she realizes that, as a neuroscientist, she's very possibly dying. And she's in absolute bliss, which seems like, well, wait a minute, how does that make sense? It makes sense because all of a sudden she's freed from, which is the whole process of the whole goal of forgiveness, she's freed from the left brain construct of an insane world, and she has a direct experience of her human life, which most people haven't had since they were 4 years of age. My thesis is that the average person is dead by the age of 4, and it takes another 70 or 80 years for their bodies to fall over. And death is the loss of contact with our human beingness, the place where life is designed to be sourced from, and the world forces us into its constructs, teaches us that that's the truth and that's what's real and that's what's important, and in so doing simply destroys the state of human beingness. And so, of course, when you challenge those people who are in their intellects and say, well, how about if you actually dig in and you look at the tool that's offered rather than mentally masturbate around what you think it might mean? What if you actually use the tool and produce the result that it's talking about? And that's such a huge threat because all of a sudden somebody has to question, as that woman did. It's like, you mean everything I've built my life on is a total falsity? Yeah, for most people, everything you built your life on is a total falsity. And, to go back to Yeshua, he says, and this even comes through from the Greek, he says, if you want to live, you got to die. For the real being to come back into full experience and expression, the non-being self has to go. It has to be dismantled. And, of course, Jill went through it with a right brain or left brain stroke. You don't have to go through a stroke to do it. You can gently and over time, consistently and consciously dismantle the left brain world and bring yourself back into a direct experience of the awesome presence of a human life, of the awesome presence of love. Hold the newborn child, and my offering is, of course, that's what we're designed to live as our whole lives long. And we've got a genetic structure that is reinforced by the world that gets us buying into insanity. And so certainly it's a big threat when you start asking people to really, truly question everything that their lives are built on. And then the exciting thing is when you realize how awesome it is to go to the direct experience of a human life, then you have a whole other world to live in. And that's when, as they spoke of, the world would be transformed in the twinkling of an eye.
You get me thinking about the mind shifters exercise that we do before still point and the worksheet. I think of those. There's certain, especially with the worksheet, it's like people hear something like, "If I'm in pain, I'm in error." What? Or the one that probably the biggest one in my work with using the worksheet is when people go, "All right, wait a second. Now you're asking me to cancel the goal." It's hard to get into some people's mind, and it's amazing because I guess it was last fall, it was maybe October or so, And I had a group of about 10 people in my home, and we were going through, at that time, the latest worksheet, which is probably about 89 versions ago. But we had a medical nurse, a very dear friend of mine, and she was talking about, we got to that point with the canceling of the goal, and she's like, well, hold. She's like, I'm having an issue. And this is a woman who's very open, very willing, and willingness is the cosmic grief. I use your phrase all the time. But she's like, now, my worksheet was that someone that we work with, that she oversees several nurses at a hospital, someone that works underneath her, making mistakes in paperwork, in doing things like catheters and injections and drug amounts and the timing of drugs, things of that nature. She's like, you're asking me to cancel the thing. I mean, she's like, this could be a life-threatening situation. And I'm like, this is the thing we need to look at here. Think about how you're feeling right now. Think about your own, not theirs. Just kind of put them completely out of the picture for a second. Consider how your own physiology is feeling right now. And consider how, I mean, I could see it, the hyped up. You could feel it in the room, how she was just radiating this. It was a really intense fear. And I'm like, just humor me on this. Just let's try it, and let's go through cancer, and let's work with this. And we did, and we went through that process. And it was one of those moments at the end when then she's like, oh, she got it. And, I mean, the entire room, it was like everybody was like, you could feel it. You could feel that tangible energy, that love, that presence, that Rakhma in the room. Some were laughing, some were crying. It was just one of those amazing experiences. And this was something that was potentially, at least, you know, in the way it looked, in reality, was life-threatening. But yet, it's not about that. It's not that situation that's the reality in our mind. It's what's my relationship that creates that reality that takes me away, what you say, the non-being, that takes me away from my direct beingness. And, man, that's probably one of the most beautiful, succinct examples I've ever seen in 17 years of canceling the goal and getting out of the left brain slush, the sluggish, flop, you know.
It's always awesome when a human life shows up in the room. And human life doesn't come from the mind, doesn't come from cycling information from the mind. It isn't present because there's feelings. It's present when there is the active presence of love, the active presence of a human life. And it's always awesome when you get that to shift. And you know, and the key to it all is the goal being the driver that maintains the left brain insanity. When you cancel the goal, you get the opportunity to collapse the insanity, and whoop, all of a sudden, there's a human life. Oh my God, it's mine! What an awesome experience! But the intellect can never approach that. You can never figure that one out, you know, and that's what the translators are doing. That's what the ivory tower does. Is, well, let's see if we can figure this out, and then we'll get it all handled. It's like, no, have a human life, and then you'll teach your mind how to talk about what the solution is, rather than let's see if we can translate words that will bring us the meaning of a human life. You can only experience a human life. There is no meaning to it. You can only experience it. So very cool. Yeah, it's wonderful, Dale, to hear the work that you're doing in the world and how you're impacting people's lives, and it's just awesome to have you as part of the team that changed the world. And I'm sure that Yeshua would be clapping his hands right now. Are you with me? Dale? Jeanie, are you with me? Hello, Jeanie. I've lost you all. Hello. David, are you there? Jeanie?
I am, Michael. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you, David. All right. I wasn't sure if I'd gotten gotten pulled out. We must have lost the connection with Dale. He was saying his connection was a little bit tenuous. So, yeah. And Jeanie had problems with her cell phone, so she may not be on at this point. So I don't know if we'll be able to get Dale reconnected. I'm certainly hoping so. Jeanie, maybe you can do this through the chat room. I don't know. We'll have to see what unfolds. Is Dr. Tim here today? No sign of Dr. Tim. All right, well, we'll wait and see if Dale comes back on. In the meantime, David, do you have any thoughts about the conversation that we're having here? I think it's awesome to hear Dale speaking about his experience from the Aramaic perspective and replicating or bringing forward that expression of being into the world is a pretty awesome thing.
Yes, Michael, and I appreciate what Dale was saying. One of the things that I heard him say is that he's learning a little bit about the Greek, and what I interpreted him saying is so that he can get into communication with their language in order to then communicate to him from the Aramaic principles and the interpretation of it, the translation of it. And to me, that's opening up to a new level of being able to intuitively be in touch with people. As you talked about Jill Bolte Taylor, and the whole idea is about letting go of the intellect, and at the same time to be able to use the intellect, to be able to see what it is, and to have the experience of it. And through the experience of it, then there is an intellectual understanding, and that's and it's the word that's used as intellect, and it's not really the intellect; it's just the experience of it. And once the words that put to it, whether it's whichever language that it is, that because of the language that is there, then the experience of it has to go through the mind. Goes through the mind, and it's lost in that way. Yet we do need the words and the language.
Just to let you know, Dale is back on.
Oh, good.
And my phone just went totally dead, and so it probably will do it again. I will just keep an eye on the switchboard. There's nobody else calling in, so it's all your show.
Okay, well, if anybody, maybe if you want to, honey, maybe you could just hang up your phone, and then if somebody does call in and wants to get in, you could just dial back in and let us know they're going to do that, or just click them on through the keyboard. That'd be fine too. And
okay, I'll do it.
Tell them that they can pop in. So, awesome. Hey, Dale, welcome back.
Hello. It sounds like we're all calling in from different places.
We're in Holiday, Florida. David's in Theodosia, Missouri. I don't know where you are. Where are you, Dale?
I'm in West Virginia, actually. So.
Oh, okay.
I'm on my way to some events. I've got events tomorrow and the next day at Unity Church in Frederick, Maryland. I'm on my way there. So.
Well, tell us about your event, and anybody that's up in the Frederick, Maryland area might just come join you. That'd be awesome.
Tomorrow is a workshop called 5 Aramaic Layers of Conscious Creation. It's from 11 a.m. to 1. And what I do is I talk about 5, I guess you could say, core understandings from the Aramaic teachings of Yeshua, as opposed to that are 5 core understandings from the original Aramaic concerning things like prosperity and creation and how we're thinking of everything backwards. I love, and a lot of that comes from working with your work over the last decade and a half, because it's not so much that we need to try harder and keep adding something in. What we need to do is start removing the blocks. And I talk about that workshop climaxes at the end with me literally going through the key concepts in Matthew 21, verses 21 and 22, which is Yeshua, say to this mountain, be removed and be cast into the sea. And I sort of take that entire phrase that we're used to from the King James Bible, and I turn it upside down and shake the rocks out all over the floor. When you hear it directly from the Aramaic, it's one of those things where people burst into tears and the room starts, you can hear just balloons popping in people's minds all over the room. Sunday morning, I'm speaking at their service, which I think is also at 11, and then on Sunday at 1, from 1 to 3:30, I'm offering the Aramaic Healing Circle, and the Aramaic Healing Circle is one of the more experiential things that I offer, and I literally, the entire first half of that is I talk 100% about forgiveness, and about especially those first 3 Beatitudes. Breathe, feel it fully, and number 3, not meek as in be stepped on, but makite, to allow it to flow, allow it to pass. Breathe, step into what you're feeling, and allow that to dissolve through your conscious breath. You're canceling what's actually in there, removing the root of your suffering. And it's the one thing we're taught not to do. We're taught not to turn away from it and look toward the light. And I tell people, look, that's not light, that's dark. Light doesn't look away, light looks at it. And then in the second half of that, we go through an anointing ceremony and a process where I use water with a really profound musical soundtrack with the water. And after doing some really intensive forgiveness exercises in the first half, in the second half we put it into practice and basically leap off the cliff. And I give people the opportunity to really have that feeling, that Rakhma, that we were talking about when the real being shows up, when, oh my God, there's someone in the room. And it's been a really beautiful experience. I've taken that literally all over the U.S., and it's always, each one has its own energy and presence, and there's this real beautiful, tender sweetness afterward, sort of like after Still Point, how there's just, you can look at the people in the room that had breathed and look at the ones who hadn't, and nobody has to point them out to you. It's obvious because you can sense that glow. And yeah, that's where the human life is. What's that?
I say you can tell where the human life is.
Oh, absolutely. You really can.
So Dale, you led us up to a point of popping the balloons in people's minds, and then you just went on like you hadn't said anything. So I think you should pop our balloons and share with us that conclusion.
Well, the balloon popping is, what we do is we bring up something, not necessarily a particular moment of something happening, but we bring up, I sort of have ways of stirring up energy in the room, and we talk about how do we put that into practice, breathing, feeling it, letting it pass. And I'll bring up an example in the beginning just to explain what I'm talking about. Like, look, what's the first thing when, you have all these great, beautiful intentions, you're such a spiritual being, but that one person walks into the room, whether it's an ex-spouse, stepmother, step-parent, or mother-in-law, something like that, boss, whatever, what's the first thing you do when they say that one thing? And, of course, the breath catches, and I'll be like, what about you're driving down the road and someone drives out in front of you, just pulls right out in front of you? What's the first thing that happens with your body? You stop breathing. How about you just found out that someone you love dearly was tragically killed? What's the first thing that happens? You stop breathing. And we start to talk about how, look, notice that. Now let's start looking at other areas in your life. Let's look at something that you're having an issue with. Right now we can look at something, it doesn't even have to be something that's raw in this moment, and let's start looking at it. What is it that I do every single solitary time to keep myself from hitting, in mechanics, what would be, or in physics, what would be called entropy, that sort of point of where the system is about to break down. What we'll actually do usually is, rather than allow that to happen in a way that the system that could rebuild itself, we just kind of jump out of the car. We sort of just pull the keys out and jump out. When Yeshua actually gave us a beautiful set of steps called the Beatitudes, especially the first 7. Even more so, I'll tell people often, if you can't remember, like in my Beatitudes workshop, I'm like, if you can't remember all 7, I kind of skate over the last 3. If you can't remember all 7, remember the first 3. If you can't remember the first 3, just remember the first 1, which is about breath and breathing. Those first 3 are literally the steps of forgiveness. And he goes on deeper with the other remaining 4 Beatitudes. But in the anointing ceremony is something that is more of when I'm in either doing an anointing or what I call a water healing, it's one of those things that when I had deep intuition that told me, okay, Dale, this is what you're doing. You're going to do a water healing ceremony. I'm like, okay. And I called the place I was doing it with, and I said, well, can you add to all the advertisements that I'm doing a water healing? They're like, ooh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, you'll see. Of course, I had no idea. But what happened was I showed up, and there was about 150 people in the workshop for the first half. And then in the second half, I said, well, I'm going to do this little water healing thing, and we'll see what happens. And if you're interested, stay. If you're not, then, it's been great having you, beautiful. And I go to the bathroom and come back, and all 150 people are still standing there. And it's like, okay. And I still, at that point, literally did not know what was going to happen. And I just let it lead me. It's interesting. The word prophet in Aramaic, anbiya, nabiyat, there's different ways of pronouncing that. What it actually means is not a soothsayer, someone who foresees the future. What it actually means is someone who comes from that true being, from that true rooted center of their being without judgment, without second guessing it, and they allow that to live them very consciously. And I had an experience where I stepped in front of that first person where up to that point, the only time I'd ever felt anything quite that profound was the birth of my two children at that time, Mikey and Lucinda, and also in still point breathing. But this was something that had a much different quality. And I was standing in front of this person, and all of a sudden they just broke down in tears. And I was very conscious that something was going on. And it was something that literally my crown chakra or whatever was wide open. It was up to that point, the most profound experience of Rakhma that I've ever had in my life. And I stood in front of these people, and I literally had the blessed water in my hand, and I let it run across their face. And I went through to all 150 people, and people were passing out. They were dropping to the floor and going through all kinds of gyrations in a lot of cases. It was just this amazing thing. People were telling me that I was whispering things in people's ears, really deep, intimate things. And it's funny because after that experience, the first thing I did after it was over, my left brain, my non-being, just said, all right, that's something, I don't know. That couldn't have been a real thing. It had to be something fake. It couldn't be real. Everybody was just caught up in the emotion of the moment, and I immediately started literally playing that game, playing that reality game, and forgetting everything that had just happened. And it took me a while. It took me a lot of worksheets. It took me still point breathing, and it took me talking with some other people before I realized, hey, Dale, that's who you really are. And what you was actually doing, you weren't healing anybody. You weren't none of that egoic stuff. You were standing in the presence of being, and by you standing in the presence of being, you're giving them that allowance to be who they are. And it was one of those incredible experiences that every time I do it now, it's like I no longer doubt that. It's always there, and I know that it's always going to be there. And I understand that it's not about me adding something in. It's not about a technique or anything. It's about me literally peeling back the layers, pulling the veil off of the temple, taking off the mask, pulling the bushels off of that light. And it's interesting how that word bushel in Aramaic is satah. Satah, the word bushel that we put over our light, is satah. Satah is the root of the word satana. And satah means slide, fall, fragment, or cut away from. To take something from its source, to literally disconnect it and say, the source and this thing are two opposite things. Like me and my source are no longer one and the same. And that's what satah, that root of that word bushel, means. And I really understood that more so ever in my entire life with that first time that I did that, water healing, for lack of a better word. I still don't know what to call it, but it's a beautiful experience, though.
It sounds like, Dale, what happened is, as you completed that, Satah came up and said, uh-oh. Oh, no,
it
no.
did.
And of course, another translation being the resistor, one who misleads, it wants to lead you back into the left brain, back into that structure, because that's what it's been taught to do. Of course, it doesn't have any will of its own. It doesn't have any source of its own. It doesn't have any power or goals of its own. It's only what we've taught it. And when we've taught it to resist and stay away from the truth of being, then as soon as it kicks in, it comes back and says, oh, no, let's just nullify all of that.
You know, it's amazing when Yeshua was tempted in the desert, Matbra, which of course means the unconscious. It's amazing. You look at that in Aramaic, it's very clearly, it's all happening in him. This is not it's great in movies to have that sort of slithery snake in the desert and all that kind of stuff, but it's all happening in his own heart, those temptations. And it's amazing how until we get that, it's a constant changing cast of characters. I love what you say in that with children, if anything you haven't dealt with, you're going to see it in your kids in full living color and Dolby sound. It's amazing. People will say, oh, you're this and you're that. And I'm like, you know what? I'm great communicating it up here, but the real test for me is what's it like when I'm at home. And I can be, Mr. Big Dog, big deal Aramaic guy or something like that, whatever anybody wants to think. But, if I get back home and there's chaos in the house, where's my part in that? And how is that for me as opposed to just in those moments where I'm wide open? And that's where we're there for each other. And that's the beauty of the support groups. That's the beauty of being connected. It's the beauty of what you're doing with the radio show right now. I mean, this is how many MP3s do you got now? Like almost 300, over 200, right? I mean, that's a huge wealth of support for people all over the world. That's just awesome.
Close to 300, and of course people can go to the website and download them anytime. And to recognize, one of the things that I offer in many of the workshops is the thought that, first of all, of course, the definition of a human life is hold a newborn child. That's our human beingness. And if we were only living in our human beingness, and never put anything in to defile our temples, anything unlike love, the purpose of life would be this awesome, creative expression of being and love and everything that goes hand in hand with that. And the minute we defile our temples, the purpose of life is to kick us right square in the limitation. Somebody's going to show up to show us the part of us that separates us from that source. And when it comes up, most people buy the left brain story about it being about somebody else because there's such denial and dissociation from that inward state. And it's been going on for so many generations that most people just wander unconsciously. They're having no idea where the source of the challenge is, and certainly no idea on how to change it. And of course, that's our purpose in doing this work, is to bring those tools forward to every mind, heart, and the being on the planet so that we can each have that direct experience of the awesome presence of love that we are, and to extend that to each other in support. So, yeah, it's awesome when human life shows up.
It's funny how there's several times in my studies over the last 17 years where I forgot, and I would occasionally forget. I mean, when you sort of showed back up in my life, we hadn't been connected for several years, and I had done that. I had been so deep into that scholarly thing, and I had forgotten for a while. And my, marriage was never bad, but it started getting strained because I was forgetting. She'd only ever been to, I think, one workshop. I think you met her one time at that point.
Right.
My wife Loretta, and it was amazing because there you were at that one time and at that one right moment, and we literally looked at each other, Loretta and I, and we rolled our sleeves up and we said, well, you know what? We're in this for the long haul. We're in this together as a family. Let's get to work. And we did. And it's amazing. People look at us, and we're going on 14 years, and they're like, oh, my God, you guys, it's so amazing, blah, 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 blah. And the thing for us is, you know what? It works if you work it. It's there. I mean, in a lot of ways, there's not many people teaching what Yeshua actually taught, but when you have it and you have the exposure to that, even knowing it is one thing, but it's, like I said earlier, it's putting it into practice is what it's all about, and that's the thing. I could talk about it until I'm blue in the face, but if there's not the actual experience, that direct experience, and the exercise of going inside and removing the bushels, it's all just, you used that word, I think it was mental masturbation. I mean, that's exactly what it is. And people love to get in that with some of my things or with your talks. Sometimes I'll meet people who are like, they really get into all the mental stuff. And it's funny how you'll see them sometimes when those worksheets come out, they're like, I've got an appointment with anything, and you'll see them take off because that inner critic, the accuser, the tempter, the resistor, achil kartza in Aramaic, it senses that, and it's like, okay, I can't go there, and it wants to run. And there's no other way, though, but through. There's no way around the desert. There's no way going over top of it. You got to go through it. And just like the Three Stooges with the mirage in the desert, and Curly's like, look, it's a mirage, and they're running toward it. They see beautiful women feeding each other grapes, and it's not until they go diving into it and get a mouthful of sand that they realize, hey, that wasn't actually even there to begin with. It was just a construct of my mind. And that's one of the most amazing realizations to come upon in the work.
Yeah, and, the intellectual journey is an important journey because once the intellect pops up its first question, until its last question is answered, it won't shut up. It'll keep spitting its stuff up. And so when one of the reasons why there's the intellectual aspect of this work is to get that thing to hell out of the way so it shuts up and we can get back to a human life and get back to the real thing. So when you get its questions answered all of a sudden and its goals canceled, you can get it to shut up. And, in order to really truly live a human life, in order to really truly be what we're designed to be, you got to be out of your mind, which is exactly what Jill Bolte Taylor describes. And there's actually another film that you can order a DVD of. Some sites say that they never made a DVD of it, but there's some people up in Canada, I think, that bootlegged it. It's a made-for-TV movie called Saved by the Light, a true story of Dannion Brinkley, and where Dannion is struck by lightning. He's pretty mean. See, he's a killer. That's his job. He likes his job. He works for the government. He kills people. And I've heard Dannion say, if somebody handed me a piece of paper and somebody's name was on that piece of paper, they were dead, and I liked my job. And he's hit by lightning, and he's out of his mind. He goes through what the world calls a near-death experience, but really it's a near-life experience. The whole carbon-based memory, the intellect, the mind, shut up and shut off with clinical death. And the human being gets to experience, perhaps for the first time since early childhood, what a human life is. And then, if they're resuscitated, and I don't suggest this as a method of having a spiritual awakening, but if they're resuscitated, they bring their human beingness back to the experience of what's going on in the world and the presence of that human life showing up after that near-life experience, or what the world calls a near-death experience. Watch that video. I mean, it's awesome, the way they lay it up and the way they lay it out, and how he then has to struggle with Satana, with that one wants to separate him and send him back to, literally to hell, send him back to the state of non-being, the state of the hostility and fear that he lived in, and his mind, his body's mind, his carbon-based memory keeps coming up with reasons to say, let's forget about this experience. Let's get rid of it, dump it, never mind it. It was all a fantasy. And he comes back right after the body goes through the death. He is this awesome presence of love, and he knows the messages he's been given. And there are two main messages that he shares with people that he was told in that near-life experience. And one of them is, you are a powerful spiritual being, and the other one is, love makes the difference. The intellect doesn't want to hear that. The intellect wants to masturbate around, well, what does this mean? I want to debate with you. And, of course, when you enter into debate, the root of the word debate means to beat. Now we're back into the hostility and fear game, and let's see who can win, rather than this cooperative effort of how do we individually, collectively bring forward human life into the world. And this is the year for it to happen. One of my early mentors used to say that all it would take would be 8 people. And I don't know if I shared this with you, Dale. If I did, maybe stop me. But the trip that I made to to St. Louis when my daughter had her baby, and the people we stayed with get a newsletter from the Pope, and the Pope had brought forward a piece of the prophecy from Lourdes with Bernadette. When Mary visited Bernadette back in the 50s, they had sealed that prophecy. But he just recently released the piece of the prophecy was that 2012 would be the year that men would lay their weapons down.
Wow.
And one of my mentors used to say...
You hadn't mentioned that, no.
Yeah, one of my mentors used to... Yeah, well, that's what Mary told Bernadette back in, I think it was 1950, whatever, 48, 52, whatever it was, that 2012 would be the year men would lay their weapons down. And it was interesting. One of my early mentors, goes back 45 years ago, used to say all it would take would be 8 people. And I got a phone call about 2 weeks later from a guy who had found our website, started doing worksheets, loved it, was changing his life. And he just called to say thank you and to tap in. And he shared with me just just like kind of offhanded conversation. He said, by the way, he said, I channel Mary. I'm in touch with Yeshua's mother, Mary. And she just recently told me that there were 7 human beings on the planet, 7 human lives active. Now, he had no idea that my early mentor had said all it would take would be 8. But all it takes for one more person to step through the gate into the expression of a true human life, letting go of hostility and fear, and we've got our critical mass. Men are going to lay their weapons down. Human life is going to, again, exist in mass upon the earth, 7.5 billion of them. And so it's kind of an interesting series of pieces of information that came together that I think that the Mayans had it right. 2012 is the year of the shift.
We've got first of all, you put my hair up on my neck talking about Saved by the Light, because literally just yesterday I was on Amazon.com looking to see if it had been released on DVD yet, which it has not. And you and I spent a day together with Danny and once at the Light Center in Black Mountain, North Carolina.
Right.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy. And it was a phenomenal film. Eric Roberts played him, just great. But we have another very dear friend in common, John Davis from Coptic Sun International. And John has been saying how in the Egyptian philosophies that he studies, how it says that 2012 is the year that we lay down our arms and that war stops. It was pretty intense that you say that. That's a beautiful sort of cross-reference there. Yeah.
If you Google Saved by the Light and DVD, there's a company up in Canada that has bootlegged it, I think, off the original VHS, and it's a good copy. I think it was about $15, so it is available on DVD. I don't think it'll ever be officially released.
At home, I've got the ability to put something from VHS to DVD, and I think I saw like brand new VHS for, like $5 or something like that, still wrapped. I'd even be able to do that, but yeah, it is a phenomenal film, and it's kind of, and I've actually asked Danny in the past, about that being on DVD, and he basically said that he's essentially non-connected to it. It was a Hollywood production thing, and he really doesn't have a say in something like that. So let's put it out there. Maybe it'll come out in a better quality. But it was a phenomenal. I remember filming that the first time it was on TV, and I had it on video and watched that until I wore it out, and then had to go out and buy an actual copy of it. So it was beautiful.
You're back on, Dale.
Yeah. I don't know what happened that time, but hello.
Okay.
I think I was done what I was saying, just talking about how great Saved by the Light was.
So you can Google that, and you'll find the DVD of it. So that's cool.
Yeah, I'll look into that. I'll look into it.
Yeah, fabulous. So, Jeanie, do we have any questions coming up in the chat room, or any callers who have a question for Dale? Well, I guess Jeanie hung back up again, so we're back here on our own. So Dale, it looks like we've got about maybe 3 or 4 minutes. So if you had some closing thoughts for people as to what would be their most important next step in the process, having listened to this, what would your offering be to them?
My offering to them would be, at least from my sort of my neck of the woods, from what I offer. One of the great ways, if you have someone that either is more looking for something, if it's someone who loves to do all the mental, wanking, and love all the mental cognitive stuff, but you want to be able to find a way to slip in the back door for them with something, with the actual work itself, I recommend them to go. You go to my website, daleallenhoffman.com. My DVD, it's called The Word, is a great marriage. It's a great introduction to the Aramaic teachings of Yeshua. It's got enough sort of substance there for someone who wants to be a brainiac, and yet it's a great way to slip in the back door with what it's really all about, getting back to the breath and get back to removing the root of your suffering. But even beyond that, above all else, I say to people, first and foremost, if I can give you one thing, it's pay attention to your breath, to your breathing. Not only in those times when you're meditating, but in general in your life. Watch how you relate with life. Pay attention to how you react with the way that you breathe. Just that alone can really make you understand how the breath is literally the catalyst for any and all true healing. It can't happen without that through your own conscious choice. The only other way you can really do it is to have a really good nervous breakdown or one of those other stroke-type experiences, and I don't recommend that to anybody. So, yeah.
You want to give us your website again, Dale? Dale, are you with us? Anyway, www.daleallenhoffman.com. And if you're still with us, Dale, how does somebody contact you if they want to invite you to their area, if they've got a group that want to hear you speak? Well, I guess we lost you, Dale. What can I say? Okay, well, then, we did miss out at the beginning of the show with Dale coming on about the invitation, and our invitation to you is to live an actual human life. Is that you back on, Dale?
No, he's not back on the switchboard yet, and my battery's getting ready to go out. If he comes back on, I'll flip him back on. We're down to 2 minutes, though.
Okay, well, I'll just talk about the closure and what we didn't cover when we opened, and the idea that we offer to everyone, usually at the beginning of each show. We changed it up a little bit today, is that you become part of the team that changed the world, that you become one who truly chooses to express and experience a human life, and by so doing puts an end to war on planet Earth. We announce each show the honoring of Memorial Day and of Veterans Day, and the idea there is begin to forgive. And the reason for war is when we're in this dissociated state of hostility and fear, blaming someone else. That's the energy that promotes war in the earth. The energy that heals war is the active presence of a human life. And so we invite you to claim your human life by forgiving. If you're not familiar with how to do that, go to our website, whyagain.com, whyagain.com. On the right-hand side, there's a link that says download worksheets. The first 5 links will give you the whole story of forgiveness and how to do it. There are radio shows there that will walk you through step by step, doing the worksheets that we've done with others. So have an awesome day. If you're in Holiday, Florida, come join us tonight. Bring a stranger to the show tomorrow and have the best year yet of your eternal life. Blessings.
Thank you for listening to Mind Shifters Radio with the Forgiveness Doctor, Dr. Michael Ryce, and his wife, Jeanie, who present the internal Aramaic process of forgiveness. Michael and Jeanie are here every Monday through Friday on Earth Angels Radio. For more on Michael and Jeanie, please visit www.whyagain.com. That's www.whyagain.com.